All right, everybody, so we are going to get started. As is our tradition at NAIT, we honor and acknowledge that the land on which we learn, work, and live is Treaty 6 territory. This place is a traditional homeland for the First Nations and Métis peoples, and today we are all part of this treaty land. The traditional name for this place is the Misquachie-Waskigan, which we also call the City of Edmonton. Welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to have you here. First time in this room this year. And happy to really happy to have Sam joining us. He's managing partner at Punchcard Solutions, and he actually spoke with us back when I first started at NAIT in 2018 on a wonderful panel of basically about, hitting a wall or things happen when you're an entrepreneur. And it was just great to have entrepreneurs share their stories. But today he's here to talk to us about a totally different topic, but it's kind of aligned as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let Sam introduce himself, more about his background, and get right into it.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a different topic, but very much related. But we're going to talk about more about making sure that we assure success. But don't get me wrong, there's lots of times when we run into walls and feels like it's the end of the world, but being an entrepreneur is mostly fun. So my name's Sam Jenkins, my pronouns are he and him, and I have the opportunity to be the managing partner at a company that I founded about 7 years ago called Punchcard Systems. We're a team of about 35 people based here in Edmonton, but across the province, and we've got staff across Canada as well. I sit on the board of a couple of different startups. We also have a couple of products that we're incubating within our organization as well. And I play a couple of different roles in our community with the Winspear Center, as well as I was one of the co-founders at Startup Edmonton. So I come to the table with a whole bunch of experience and experience that I'm actually pretty proud of, but it's actually the timeline associated with my experience that I think is really important. I've been working in the technology and startup space for about 25 years. I worked for my first startup, not knowing anything about the tech space in 1999. That company was later acquired. I started my own business for a while, for another firm for a bit, but it was in 2012 when we were building out Startup Edmonton. I also started a healthcare services or a healthcare software services company. But it wasn't until 2016 that I realized that what I love doing is building product. Now, as the CEO of our business, and I'll talk about this in a moment, but I'm always a product manager. And what we're going to be talking about today is applying product lens to organizational success. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit far-reaching, but we'll kind of understand the thesis as we move through this. So just a bit of background about Punchcard. We're a digital product studio. We work with our customers to build products, and sometimes they are mobile apps, sometimes they're digital platforms, but primarily we're here to act as an enabler for our customers in that way. And the background behind this is that competition is harder as you all enter the marketplace as entrepreneurs or as employees, or depending on what you decide to do post your program here. Things are moving faster and faster and faster. We use our expertise to help our customers be more competitive. We do that in two different ways, either through customer experience platforms or through systems for employee experience. And we do that with a number of different types of customers, both larger enterprises, probably some companies that you understand or have seen before, and then with a number of startups as well. So I like to think that the startup work keeps our batteries filled, and the enterprise clients that we work with, they pay our bills. So it's a mix of customers helping us, or where we help them figure out what digital and product looks like. Primarily, strength comes from the team that we built. That's absolutely, I think, one of the difference makers for us. It's also given me the opportunity to get to think more and more about the topic that we're focusing on today. When I talk about outcomes, what I mean by outcome is business value. When I talk about outputs, that is the things we do in order to deliver value. And the reason why I can do that is because I have an amazing team that I get to work with on a regular basis. But I will, just as a quick disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I've just made tons of mistakes along the way. As we go through the content here today, ask questions. I'll put my contact information up on the screen and download link as well for my slides. Don't hesitate to reach out. Building things is fun. Making mistakes is a lot of fun. Asking for advice from other people is free. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily get it every time, but I'm giving you that offer here today. There's actually 5 key learnings that I'm going to go through here. This is a little bit like a Quentin Tarantino film. I'm going to tell you what we're working towards at the beginning, and I'll explain what all these things mean and how they work as we work through this. The number one thing that we'll be talking about is about driving decisions based on outcomes rather than outputs, and we'll explain the value about that in a second. We'll talk a little bit about vision and the nature of building healthy venture around vision. We're going to talk a bit about making conscious choices. Probably the hardest thing to do as a venture builder, as a entrepreneur, as somebody who's building something, is deciding what to do and what not to do. We're going to talk about problems and why they're more fun to be falling in love with. And then finally, we're going to talk about getting to market quickly and the value of shipping your product. Start my conversation here talking about this Dilbert cartoon. As venture builders, we always want to build more, right? We always want to add more features. We want to satisfy more users. We want to be able to build a bigger platform to be able to drive value. But fundamentally, when we're thinking about outcomes versus outputs, the outcome is what matters. When I think about the outcome, it's what we're trying to achieve as a venture builder or as an entrepreneur. The outputs are the actions or items that we do in order to achieve that outcome. So to me, value is the outcome. The outputs actually largely don't matter. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit simplified, but we can, if we are always focusing on outcomes, that gives us the opportunity to be able to change our outputs over time. And that is an absolute must when we're building something from scratch or a new venture, is that things will happen that force you to change. But if our outcomes are well-defined and well understood, it gives us a chance to pivot and to adapt. That nature of being adaptive is really critical because we all come to the table with a fairly high degree of cognitive bias. Can anybody here define what cognitive bias might be?
It's like when you look for things to support your understanding.
Absolutely, that's a very real thing that we all bring to the table because we all have our own experiences. And this is what's called the curse of knowledge. We know more, we think we know more than our users, so we apply that knowledge in terms of how we operate. And so what we want to do as we're building our products is really look at things through the lens of customer experience or the customers we're looking to solve. I'll reference a bunch of books in my presentation today. They'll be included in the download afterwards. But one of my favorite books associated with this type of thinking is a book by Don Norman, who's one of the principals in a company in the Valley called Nielsen Norman Group, called The Design of Everyday Things. And he said that this is a 20-year-old book, it's not new, but the insight is still really, really valid. Two of the most important characteristics of good design are discoverability and understanding. And that's from the perspective of the people that we're looking to serve. And the rationale behind this is that there is an interesting mental model associated with what we're trying to build. Now, if we're building a product, in this case, I decided I'd pick a blender as a product. You, as the designer or the creator, think about it from the perspective of how are people going to use this product? Our customers or our users are going to think, how am I going to use this thing? And the reason why this is different is that there's a two-way experience between the user and your product, and there's really only a one-way experience between you and your product. Your customers can decide when to use it and when to purchase it, whereas we only get the opportunity to put our products out into the market. And so if we are coming to this perspective of thinking about like how are people going to use this product, we are already applying our internal biases to what we're looking to build. Why that's important is that our customers don't buy things from us because of what we think. Our customers buy stuff from us based on what they think. And so we want to make sure that the lenses that we use, and there are many lenses that we can apply to product development, but our lenses are not nearly as valuable as the ones that our customers might bring to the table. And that's why the nature of outcomes versus outputs is really important. When we think about things from our own perspective, maybe like I want to build more features, I want to be able to acquire more customers, it's less important and potentially less valuable than the outcome, the type of value that we can deliver for our customers as we're building our product. And this is backed up with a lot of different models. This is one of my favorite ones. This is a project logic model that was initially developed for research at the Kellogg Foundation. But the nature of when we apply this to venture building or entrepreneurial development is that we have a certain amount of resources. We have a certain amount of resources that include the people on our team, the time that we have, or even the money that we have to be able to apply to our problem solving. And we do a certain amount of work to be able to leverage the resources that we have on hand. Now, on the other hand, we also think about impact. As a founder in an organization, we gravitate here because this is really like, this is where profit lives. This is where the impact of the organization that we're looking to build. But it's in this interplay between the features we build and the outcomes that we satisfy by developing those features. That's where the sweet spot is for us as new venture builders, because what we're trying to figure out with our outcomes is what are people going to do with it and what problems are they going to solve. Now, the nature of understanding a problem isn't simple. It's not like we get to come up with a problem statement at the beginning of building a business or a product and stick with that problem the entire way through. We have to be continuously evaluating the nature of that problem and probably continuously challenging our assumptions when it comes to the product or the problem that we're solving. That's why I say always be questioning, right? This is not just applied to venture building. I think it's kind of in any model that we're participating in, we should be continuously questioning and resetting our expectations when it comes to what we're building. And these are a couple of questions that I use as a bit of a framework or a model as we're not only working with our clients, but also looking at our own products and services to be able to understand, are we building the right thing? Are we doing the right thing today in order to get to the right outcome tomorrow? So these are all, you can build your own framework. This is not, there's no copyright on this, but asking the right types of questions along the way is always going to give you more information, more data, and ultimately more knowledge to be able to make a better decision. But it comes down to this bolded question here in terms of if we implement this feature or this part of the product, if we spend this time, how is it going how will our customer behavior change in some sort of meaningful way? And that's the nature of problem solving for somebody. If we are solving a problem for ourselves, it's probably not worth it. We may have a little bit of success, but if we're solving other people's problems, that's the nature of really good product development. Now, this comes down to, this was a hard learned bit of experience, I suppose. In our first business, we didn't think specifically enough about the problems that we were solving. We were thinking about building the venture and we were thinking about the solution that we were building, but we weren't really falling in love with the problem that was actually really important. And it came down to a problem with vision. Healthy ventures start, continue, end with healthy vision. And luckily, I have another framework that we get to work through in this, that makes it easy to be able to understand what vision means or organizational health in general. I'm speaking really fast. I'm just mindful of we only have an hour together. But one of my favorite books on this topic is a book by Pascal Lencioni called The Advantage. Easy read, but I can boil it down to a very simple set of actions that you can take as you're thinking about your role in maybe your venture or in a different venture as well. But if we aren't focusing on organizational health, our product will likely fail. And why this is important is that at the end of the day, the nature of vision is what guides us or gives us strength as we're going through some of those challenging times through entrepreneurial development. And Lencioni talks about his 4 disciplines model, and the whole book is in this one slide, so you don't need to buy the book, but I recommend it. But it starts with building a cohesive team. And this might be a leadership team, this might be a founding team. At the end of the day, the nature of accountability and team development is critical for all startups. We never have enough time, we never have enough money, but if we hold ourselves accountable to good expectations, that's how we end up being successful. The second step is around clarity. And clarity takes a bunch of different forms, but it's about understanding purpose and vision, and I'll explain that in a second. The third part is around over-communication. It's about making sure that everybody on your team understands what we're doing, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. I don't think I can underline or highlight or circle that enough. Most teams fail because they don't have the right direction. They haven't been given clear expectations in terms of what they're responsible to do and how they're going to get there. And I mean, there's intended results at that point. If we don't tell someone where we're trying to go. Why do they know, or how would they know what the destination is? The final component of the 4 disciplines model is around reinforcement, and that's about action. Everybody in this room is a leader. Maybe in this class, in the institution, maybe in your new venture, maybe it's in another job that you work, but ultimately it's that action of being a leader and the consistency of being a leader within our organizations that drives strength and potential success when it comes to implementation. Now, I think about 6 key questions when we're talking about that nature of purpose. That's that second step in the model. And when I think about these 6 questions, I've taken them from the new venture lens. They're a little bit different than what the author puts in his book, but when we're building a new business within our business, when we're working with one of our clients, we're constantly asking these questions of the people that we're looking to be able to support and act with. 1, so why does my venture exist? Now, don't get me wrong, there are lots of different good reasons to build a venture. Knowing what it is the first step in the journey. How do we behave? Why do we behave these ways? That ends up being our core values. What do we do? Often people forget how important the what is in the equation, because the nature of product, it doesn't matter if we're building a single product or a services company, that product lens is pretty critical in terms of the problem solving matrix that we might go through. The strategy behind what we're doing is also pretty critical, because the nature of understanding not only where we're going, but how do we know when we get there is often overlooked. And then finally, from a logistics perspective, prioritization, what's most important today, and who's going to do what. Probably wouldn't be surprised, the number of times that I see people expect something to happen within a new venture, but they forget to tell people to do something. They forget to get accountability in terms of who's going to do what at what time in the venture process, and then it fails because we don't get what we need. At Punchcard, we have a fairly simple vision. We exist to create positive transformative impact. Every time I read that out loud, it scares me just a little bit, because the nature of our business is based on impact, and that nature of transformation in a really complicated world doesn't get easier and easier as time goes on. We have a number of core values that we've clearly defined and we talk about quite a bit. And then we also have product strategy tactics that go along with how we work in terms of the digital products, software platforms that we get to build. Ultimately, that's the why, the how, and the what, who, and when that exists within our strategic plan. Now, we all need to do a little bit of planning along the way. Sometimes it takes the form of a very structured business plan. Sometimes it takes the structure of a really unstructured business plan, like a business model canvas or a lean canvas. But the nature of understanding these key questions, I can't understate how important they are. Because if we can define these for ourselves, it means it's a little bit easier to define them for other people. And a venture, like a new venture or even an existing one, an old one, can rally around these clear answers, especially when things get more difficult, when things get filled with unknowns or particularly uncomfortable. Now, that nature of purpose, I think, is really important, because we all have to have a purpose. Just existing isn't enough. It could be around wealth. It's kind of a boring purpose, but it's still a decent one. But I think around maybe building community or a greater cause or doing amazing things for your customers. These are all purposes that you can attach to your venture, to the why you're doing this. And again, these are kind of outcome focused. If I want to build a greater community, the outputs that I develop based on that outcome, they can change, and they probably will over the course of a lifetime. My career today is different than it was 10 years ago, and I hope it'll be different in 10 years from now. I probably need to generate a little bit more wealth along the way, but fundamentally, my career is going to evolve as I evolve, as my talent and skills evolve, but my purpose probably won't change too much. And so, like I said earlier, at Punchcard, we exist to create positive transformative impact. That's also my purpose. As an entrepreneur, I wake up every morning because I want to create impact. I want to be of service to the community around me. Now, this is not an easy process to get to. It takes a lot of work, probably a lot of note-taking, a lot of whiteboarding and talking to friends, family, people that you trust, one of the tools that I like to use is the 5 whys. And 5 whys are simple. You ask yourself, why do we exist? And then you ask why a bunch more times. This slide is pretty boring. But that nature of using a design thinking process like the 5 whys gives us a chance to be able to dive deeply into what has potential to matter. Now, when I think about our organization, we exist to build software, right? That's the what we do. But then we started thinking about, well, why is that important? Well, organizations and startups, they need to adapt faster. We exist in a global economy. Post-pandemic, things are both closer together and further apart than ever before. And organizations struggle, founders struggle, new ventures struggle because this is hard work. And in order to maximize our ability to harness change, we can help our customers win a little bit more often. And by winning more, we can have more impact on the world around us. Now, with my team, we talk about this over and over and over again. We challenge why this is important to us, because if we don't challenge it, who will? But more importantly, it fits within our core values because we know exactly who we are and why we exist as an organization. And again, this is free advice, but probably the advice that I wish that somebody had given me at the very beginning of our first business was define your purpose and define your values. At least then you have an operating system or a definition of your DNA that other people can understand and either select in or select out. It's okay if people don't want to work alongside you or with you if your values aren't aligned. Right? That's a pretty simple thing to understand, but as you live it, it becomes really obvious how important it is. And so we have 6 core values. It starts with showing up, taking risks, and shipping product. It continues with opening up to the unique competencies and capabilities of the people at our team and our ability to be able to elevate. We call that inclusivity. We know that when we team up, we end up being stronger together. It's why we're building a team rather than outsourcing or employing contractors. Integrity is pretty critical in our business, especially when we're thinking about the nature of inclusivity, because often software is hidden and biases that happen within either user experience or software development or machine learning and AI get hidden behind the scenes. And so if we're not acting in the right way all the time, sometimes those biases can be embodied in the work we do. It's kind of like we make all the decisions that we would make and then tell our mom about it. It's kind of where that fits. And then from an internal perspective, the nature of ownership and mastery for us is really important because we work remote, our team is spread out, so we rely on people to make really great decisions when it comes to ownership. We want the people on our team to be thinking that the clients that we work with, they're trusting them with their ideas, with their livelihoods, with their excitement, and we want people to make really great choices. And then finally, mastery is all about leveling up as we continue on. Technology is always changing. Competencies always have to change along with that. And if we don't embody that lifelong learning responsibility, we probably will, well, we just won't be very valuable to the world around us. Now, change is hard, but change is harder for you as a leader. And the nature of this work, the purpose and value definition work, is actually what makes it easier to be a leader, because it gives us that infrastructure to be able to communicate what matters to us. And if we know what matters, then we also know what doesn't matter. We can make really great choices around prioritization as we work towards what's important. Now, that nature of deciding what's important falls within what I call conscious choices or conscious decision making. My business partner calls it avoiding mediocrity, but I like to be a little bit more politically minded and treat that from a positive perspective. But the nature of making a conscious choice means that we are choosing to do something as opposed to letting gravity take its course. So by making conscious choices, typically we're actually making better choices because we're putting some energy into the framework of making those decisions. Now, there's a couple of things that I look at in terms of conscious decision-making around product development. One is around knowing who our customers are. If we know who our customers are and who our customers aren't, we can choose what to build and what not to build. And there's two types of customers. There's not always two, there's sometimes many, but in this case, I think about who uses our product and who pays for it. Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes they're not. If we're thinking about two-sided marketplaces, we might have multiple types of customers that we have to be evaluating as we're establishing our venture. Now, there are lots of tools that we get to use to do that. I like to use this tool here, Value Proposition Canvas. It's a component of the business model canvas, if it's something that you're familiar with, from a book called Value Proposition Design. And that's why I like it is that it's simple. There's two parts to how I think about our customers. They're the customers and the pains they have, the gains they want to achieve, and the jobs that they need to do or the jobs to be done. And then our responsibility is the products we build, the gains we create, and the pains we relieve. And really great value proposition models come with kind of equal weight on both sides. We want to make sure the products we build map to the jobs that our customers have. This comes back down to falling in love with a problem, which I'll speak here about in a second. But if we aren't thinking about our customers as a cornerstone to our value proposition, it means we're probably putting ourselves in that role. And it means we're likely making biased decisions in terms of what we want to create. The second part is around optimizing cycles. One thing that I see time and time again, especially with, actually I was going to say with early stage entrepreneurs, but also this is true with people who are second time around, is that the speed in which we operate is vitally critical. And why I say speed is important has to do a lot with quality. Intercom, which is a user experience product in the support space, they talk about the nature of planning and overhead. Now, when I think about a business plan is a big document that potentially looks out months or years of time. When we're in the product development cycle, we want to think about short-term planning because short-term plans also have less overhead. And as we change, we need to be able to adapt to that change over time. Now, that doesn't mean that long-term strategic planning and business planning isn't important, but you have to pair that larger scale planning with smaller scale adaptive planning to be able to support your team. And the reason why that's important is that plans that are longer term out typically drop in terms of accuracy. So we want to find that balance between enough planning to be safe, but not too much planning that we are wasting our time, our resources, potentially our money. Because one thing that is true is that we are less smart today than we are 6 weeks from now, 6 months from now, and 6 years from now. So we want to make sure that we are not making decisions today that we can't push off until tomorrow. And I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but what we want to do as a part of our cycle is we want to make the decisions with as much data as possible that we have today. So when it comes to our business strategy, we might have an overarching business strategy that guides us in the right direction. But when it comes to the features we're building, we probably want to be deciding what features to build as close to the time as when we deploy them. And that's because of one really accurate truth that I will say time and time again to our team, and now they're starting to say this over to me, so it means I've said it enough times. Pressure make diamonds. The nature of that pressure, that constraint, and it doesn't matter if it's less time, less money, less people, it gives us the chance to be able to be really, really, really conscious with the decisions that we're making. If you have 1 day to get something done, if you have 1 day to complete your bucket list, you're going to pick the most important thing on your list. That's what we want to do in our venture is we want to pick the most important thing that is going to give us the most value today. And ultimately, the lens that we can use is what's going to satisfy our customer's problem most effectively. Now, if you have 10 customers or 10 types of customers, that might be an indication that you have too many customers because that means you're making a decision without constraint. We want to try and constrain ourselves as much as possible, which is why this model is also important. The constraint of time is in many ways a benefit to us. Is anybody here really good at doing papers or assignments the night before? Right? Yeah, so that's kind of human nature. It's because the nature of constraint means that we're forcing ourselves to get to a deadline. By creating deadlines on our behalf, we're giving ourselves that structure to be able to be our most successful. Now, that doesn't mean leave your assignments to the last minute.
Well, that's weird to say.
I have some readings to do for a class tomorrow, so I probably should take my own advice sometimes. The nature of problems, though, is that we have to fall in love with them time and time again. But if we're falling in love with a problem, it probably means we get to be more successful long term. Solutions will come and go, like we've been talking about. And so when I think about our role as a founder within an organization, or as an entrepreneur, or even as a leader, is that we always have to apply the lens of product management to what we do. And I think of that lens as being user or customer experience, technology experience, and then business strategy. By looking at those three lenses, that gives us a chance to understand, well, what's most important. And again, back to that nature of the problem that we're looking to solve. Now, problems sit within life cycles. The way we work in our business is a lot of iterative loops. And so it actually kind of looks like this, where we work with our customers to discover, do a bunch of work, throw away a bunch of work, do more work, and get down to that problem. And then we iterate in terms of what we build. To me, this means we have an assumption or a hypothesis, and we test that and test it and test it and test it. And that's the product development life cycle that gives our team the best results. But it comes down to finding a really good problem. And well, this number here can be whatever you want. I say spend more time figuring out your problem than you do solving it. In our organization, we spend about 40% of our time shaping the problem and about 60% of the time solving it. We do that loop over and over and over. And like I said, pressure makes diamonds. So when we're following a process like this, where we identify an opportunity, we classify it, we prioritize what it means, we define it, and then we get into our actual design, build, test loop. Now, when you're building an early stage product, unfortunately, you have to be good at all these things because you don't necessarily have all the other people around you to help do that. But as you grow a business, you get to find other people who might have more competency in other places. That's part of the advantage of scale and growth. But fundamentally, I would say like your best tool as a new venture creator is problem solving and getting really good at this loop in terms of figuring out the problem and figuring out the solution over and over and over again. Not only is that going to serve you in the nature of new venture development, but it's also going to serve you being a good employee, being a good citizen, being a good community member, because there's always problems to solve. And being able to figure out the best ones, well, that's where really great ventures come into play. And that comes to the last component around showing up, taking risks, and shipping. When I say shipping it, I mean product. If we don't take something to market, it doesn't matter, right? We can navel gaze all we want, we can come up with ideas, but if we're not actually delivering something, our customers will never know about it, and we're never going to create any value. Now, in our organization, we use a tool set called Agile or Agile software development, and I like to apply that to product development lifecycle, things like lean startup, also use this type of iterative loop. But at the end of the day, I love using lightweight iterative development in a highly collaborative environment to be able to solve problems. Like people, I like working with people, so I like applying processes that allow me to get to work with people. But there's 4 principles associated with Agile that I think are most important. 1, the nature of customer collaboration over contracts. If the problem we're solving is the most important part, then our customers are probably they're more important than the contracts we solve. Now that doesn't mean that contracts are important, but we don't want to negotiate new contracts every time we have to figure out something from our clients. So by applying that type of thinking, it means we're always learning and providing balance or space within our projects to be able to learn from our customers. And it's taken us a while to figure out how to do that artfully. But all of this is practiced skill. The nature of people over process. I don't know if I can underline this one enough either. Surrounding yourself with smart people is the best strategy that you can ever implement. And always be the dumbest person in the room. That's if you can strive for that, then you will win 100% of the time. Now, processes aren't unimportant. We need to have process. We need to have accountability. We need to have expectation setting. But if we're surrounded by really great people, we can be more flexible when it comes to the process. The nature of change versus planning comes back to what I was talking about in terms of cycles. If we were able to respond to change quickly, that gives us a chance to beat our competitors. And plans often don't take into account all the different permutations that come along with reality. So if we know how to respond to change, it gives us the chance to be able to take whatever our venture throws at us and adapt, evolve, and potentially succeed a lot more successfully than if we have a very rigid, structured plan that we have to follow. And if we don't follow it, things fall apart. Again, you want to have some plan, you want to have some structure, but you want your structure to respect the fact that change will happen. And in the case of Agile, when we're building software, it's about working software over documentation. Products that are in the market are going to be products that are overly documented, primarily because a customer is not going to pay you for something that doesn't exist. Customers only going to pay you for something that actually exists and is out of the marketplace. There's a couple of cycles associated with this that I like to think about as we're going through these loops. I mentioned earlier lean startup, so the nature of being able to learn, build, and pivot. So at the end of the day, as we learn things, we apply those learnings to what we're building, we get that in the market, and that gives us a chance to be able to pivot. But that starts with things like design thinking. So as I was talking about earlier, the nature of applying cognitive bias to the problems that we're solving really is all about empathy. It's all about understanding who our customers are and what types of problems they're having or could be having along the way. And then executing. But again, this is where we develop our outcomes, and this is where we develop our outputs. And there's a reason why we want to be empathetic about our customers versus, worrying about building the product, is that if we are falling in love with the problem, the solutions are going to change. In fact, I guarantee that if you start a venture here and you have a clearly defined output associated with what you're building, you will probably fail over here. But if you start your venture with a clearly defined problem, you're going to be a lot more successful. That's the nature of minimal viable product thinking. Is anybody here familiar with what an MVP might be?
We're going to take them through that.
Sweet. But, well, I see a hand raised. What would you, well, I mean, without reading, what do you think an MVP is?
Basically, like, if you're building a product and features you can put it in the product, just to gain the customer's point of view.
That is a perfect definition of that. For people who didn't hear, it's the minimum number of features to be able to get value from the customer, right? And so why we like to think about that is that our customers are not always right, but they do vote with their wallets. And we want to make sure that we can get our customers on board as effectively as possible. Now, if you go onto like Google image search and search for like, what does an MVP look like? There's lots of different pictures. Usually they have like skateboards and bicycles and cars. I like to think about it like cake. So while our product is the entire cake, a slice of cake is our MVP. Now, you still get icing and there's still parts, and I just thought this cake was pretty, but there's still all these components of the cake. You're still getting a full experience, but it's not the whole thing. And if you think about it, it's actually as much work to build the whole cake as it is to build the one slice. But that nature of being able to build that whole experience gives us the chance to be able to really understand who our customers are. And luckily, I have another framework. There are a couple of things that we use to be able to understand what goes into an MVP or what's good about an MVP. One is buy-in. Do we have enough value that somebody's going to purchase this or at least spend their time with us as we're going through the product cycle? I love to get customers buying my MVP because it's a great way to fund your business, is to get your customers paying for something that you've created value in. The second thing around an MVP that I really love is around demonstrating future value to those early adopters. There has to be a vision for the future in our product within the MVP that our customers understand that while this might be a first step in the right direction, there's many more steps for them to continue with you. And finally, and arguably the most important, is around engagement. Can we create a feedback loop from our customers to be able to, if I go back a couple slides, do we have a feedback loop that we can use to be able to go through this phase time and time again using real data to be able to make our product better. And why I say that's the most important is that it doesn't have to be the most complex. It could be something as simple as, are we asking our customers about what they think about our product as we get it to them? But that feedback loop is essential because we're setting an expectation of learning and that our product isn't perfect yet. But we're striving to be able to get there over time. And the only way we can do that is with real world information. The other element that I think is important that's often underlooked is appetite. So I define appetite as, can I afford to build it? So often we overbuild an MVP because we add too many features or we add too much functionality. But I like to say appetite is defined as the right budget for the right problem, not the right budget for the right solution. So if you are building something that is a $1 million problem and you solve it with a $1,000 solution, awesome. If you solve a $1,000 problem with a $1 million solution, not so awesome. We want to make sure that the appetite associated with what we're solving matches and is preferably the gap between cost and value is as great as possible. And if you take these 4 things, it gives you a chance to be able to map out what's most important for you as a founder or as a venture builder, coupled with what's possible for your client. Now, again, I've got another framework that I like using. There's actually a series of frameworks that I think are really important associated with mapping. Coming back to the value proposition, empathy mapping, super critical in terms of understanding what our customer is thinking, what they're saying, what they're hearing, how they act. And we take that data and we can apply it to things like customer journey map. Customer journey map is a tool that we use to visualize the process that our customer might go through to be able to use our product. And this might mean we're looking at our sales processes or their sales decision-making processes. It might mean we're looking at how they're interacting with our product. Maybe we're building a retail store and we're thinking about how they engage with products in the real world. And then also thinking about what happens after they experience our product with us so that we can do our best job of meeting those empathetic needs. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't think about kind of the market in general, and that's typically where an experience map sits, where we think about those different phases, but from the perspective of like not specific to our product. And then as we begin to work with other people on our team, right, beyond the founder or beyond the founding team, we need to start thinking about how do we document that in a way that we can get our vision across to other people. I like to use service blueprinting. It's very simple swim lane diagrams that look at the actions we're going through, what the customer sees, what we do as a backstage as from the organizational perspective, and what are all the other support tools that I need to implement to be able to meet that customer need back to the empathy. These are all actually part of that by the same person who wrote the book at the very beginning, Don Nilsson or Don Norman, but I put a link in the slides for this for everybody here as well. I'm going to skip the next slide and talk a little bit about shaping our cycles. Now, when we're talking about the constraints associated with time, associated with what we want to do for our MVP, I often look at these 5 questions to be able to define what are we going to do in this next cycle. And it starts with, is it rough? Is it solved? Is it bounded? Have I put a definition of what we're looking to solve within this next period so that at least I can tell other people on my team or myself what we're looking to achieve? I want to be able to understand the appetite, my appetite in terms of how is this worth solving? How much time do we want to spend solving it? Is this a 1-week problem? Is this a 2-week problem? Is this a 6-month problem? And spoiler alert, if it's a 6-month problem, we should maybe break it down smaller. But at the end of the day, by being very truthful with ourselves in terms of the scale and size of the problem, gives us a chance to be a little bit more successful. In terms of a core element of a solution, I like to think about this as, do I know enough that I can draw my product or my process on a whiteboard? Any more than that, and I'm probably doing too much extra work before I start actually getting into that problem solving. And probably most importantly are these last 2 questions. What do I want to avoid today, and what do I want to not do at all? Again, these are elements of conscious decision making that we often forget about because Avoidance is a strategy for us to be able to use our resources as effectively as possible. And this is why I think we all, as we're building a new venture, play the role of the product manager. Now, a product manager is responsible for a lot of different things. I mean, it's supporting our teams, it's building vision, it's doing some of the strategic planning that I was talking about earlier, but it's about bridging the gap between our users and the product that we're building. So it doesn't matter if you're building a software tool, a physical retail experience, a food product, it doesn't really matter. Our goal as a product manager is to make sure that we understand who our users are and the problems they have from the user experience perspective. Now, none of this is gospel. This is all kind of my learned experience, but by practicing it over and over and over and following rhythm or ritual, that's where some of the secret comes in, is that as you repeat the same things over and over and over, you begin to build muscle memory. And that really is the secret to like good venture, is that when we get repeatable about our success, it means that we become masters at it as well. And ultimately, we all fail along the way. This is true regardless of how big our venture is. We are going to make lots of mistakes, but we want to make sure that we're bridging those mistakes with successes too. And at the end of the day, don't be afraid to screw up. Don't be afraid to get the problem wrong. Don't be afraid to find the wrong customer. The key is adapting as quickly as possible as you work through a lot of these kind of shapes and frameworks as you go forward. And finally, done means delivered. This comes back to shipping product. At the end of the day, make sure you get to market so you can validate with customers, because learned experience, we spent, I don't know, 6 or 8 months building our first product, and we had commitments from our customers, but when we took it to market, they said, well, actually, we don't really need this. We wasted all that time. And at the end of the day, when you deliver product and you get real world data quickly, it gives you the chance to adapt as rapidly as possible and use as little resource as possible along the way. So again, I'll put those key learnings up on the slide here again. Outcomes over outputs every day of the week. Focusing on that clear vision is going to keep your organization or what you're building healthy. Make conscious choices. And I think this is a good life lesson. When we fall to gravity, it's probably not the choices we would want to make, and we end up being disappointed later on. Fall in love with the problem and show up, take risks, and ship your product. I'll put this up here. The slide deck is available at that URL. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And of course, like I said at the beginning of the talk here, reach out if you have questions. At the very least, we can jump on a call. At the very most, we could probably grab a cup of coffee. But fundamentally, all of this is learned. So if I can teach one of these things to one other person, I mean, probably done a little bit of a good job. So thanks for everybody's attention today. We've got a couple minutes left in the hour, and happy to take questions.
First, guys, I'm
visual program that started going, we're going to take you through that whole process.
Yeah,
Everything that Sam talked about, but what I wanted to bring him in for is for you to understand, ultimately, the most important thing is the beginning, understand your problem. Understand your problem, understand your problem. And if you don't plan on being an entrepreneur, everything he said translates to being an entrepreneur. Everything.
Yeah.
And know your why, and hang around with people who are smarter than you. They'll bring you up, they'll raise you up, and things like that. So thank you very much, Sam. Is there any questions?
I like what you said about being the dumbest person in the room. That reminds me of a quote I read from the book, The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. Have you read that?
I haven't.
It's by Darren Hardy. It's really good.
Okay. It served me well. My business partner is way smarter than I am. I get to learn from him all the time. It means I also get to benefit from how smart he is. Sometimes it makes me feel dumb though. He doesn't do that on purpose. Don't tell him that.
Share any experience of yours where you were able to identify some industry and what problems were prominent and how you were able to solve that problem using all the principles you described?
It's a big question. So, I mean, I'll use Punchcard as that example. We started Punchcard because we realized that we either had to go find a job or build a job. And I wasn't yet ready to not be an entrepreneur. And we had learned a lot about building really great digital product and working with customers along the way. And so I wanted to make sure that we could help other people solve problems. Because I talk to entrepreneurs all the time, and we've been at this with this business since 2016, 2015, 2016. And I still hear the same things from customers, is that this journey is hard. It's really easy to lose money. It's really easy to build the wrong thing at the wrong time. That's in this book, The Right It. Albert Soy talks a lot about like building the wrong thing or the right thing at the wrong time, or the wrong thing for the wrong people at the right time. There's so many different permutations that we can go through that we end up being unsuccessful. And fundamentally, I wanted to be able to help people do that a little bit more. Now, in our business, we have a law enforcement technology platform that we're building right now. And where we got into, or how we got into building this was, I sit on the board of a impairment testing platform, and we work a lot with policing agencies. And we realized that they had a problem where they were collecting data that was really one-sided, and we wanted to make sure that there was a better sense of accountability associated with roadside testing. So we built a tool set for that, looking at who their customers are and who their funders were. By looking at the problem that they were having, coupled with who the customer would be in terms of who pays for things, we were able to find an interesting product niche. And now we're iterating on top of that to be able to hopefully do a better job for those customers. Doesn't mean it's easy. It means we're doing a lot of questioning. It means we run into walls sometimes too. But in that product, we're doing 3 paid pilots before the end of the year, one of which is with Toronto Police and the others with the state of Colorado. So like I feel like we're onto something, but we won't know until we ask more questions and we get more customers and we validate more assumptions along the way too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Do you find that do you get approached by people with problems, or do you guys kind of come up with the problems and put your solutions out there?
Good question. People often come to us with solutions, and then we walk them back and help them figure out the problem, and then walk towards a better solution. And it depends on who the customer is. In many cases, if we're working with like a larger client, like an enterprise style client, they may have a discomfort, and so they know they need to do something, especially like in post-pandemic times, thinking about evolving like hybrid workplaces. People know they need to change. They know they need to transform as an organization, and we help them understand and work along that pathway. But often it is like people come with a bunch of assumptions that we get to unwrap and challenge, and sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes we get, like this happens all the time. Well, I know what I want. I just want you to build it. That's not us. We wish them well, and they're just not our customer. They're not the right person for us.
Yeah. So my question is, how do you find those smart people? And maybe if you'd like to share how you went to a business partner.
Sure. He and I have worked together for 20 years. We worked together in a business, and we did the really terrible thing of quitting at the same time. So I feel bad about that. But so we've just been friends and colleagues for 20 years. And while we are business partners, we're not necessarily best friends, but we understand our core values together and our core purpose, and that's where our unification is. We're also pretty close because we've been working together for a long time. I think it comes down to spending some time on your own, understanding your core values, your core purpose, and broadcasting that. Like, be proud of the things that you stand for. Talk about it. I mean, I think you're in an amazing situation right now, being on campus, to find other like-minded people to maybe not work together in the same venture, but I think partnerships start happening now, and start building that network. I say this to folks on our team. If you start building your network today, you may leave our organization and go someplace else, but you get to take your network with you. And so you may not find your business partner or your colleagues today. Those relationships might evolve into the future so that it becomes ready later on. But put yourself out there, spend the time networking, build a muscle around it, doing stuff like this. This is exactly the right way to be able to find other like-minded individuals. Compare notes. You might find somebody has like completely different values than you, and that's going to be an important thing to learn about, like what's important or not to you as well.
You mentioned earlier that you have to be in love with the problem.
Sure.
So, because sometimes, what are your tips, especially for most of people who are we tend to fall out of love? It's because when we hit a roadblock, it's a problem. So it's really hard to stay in love. So, what are your tips for us to stay in love with that problem?
It's a good question because I think about that from the perspective of some of the volunteer work that I do. When we're thinking about like being a volunteer or like a community supporter, you have to really love what you're doing or the organizations that you're contributing to. And so again, it comes back down to the core values. If you are working on problems that aren't in alignment with your core values or what you believe in, it becomes a lot easier to get disenfranchised, associated, like to not love your problem anymore. I think one of the reasons why people also fall out of love with their problem is that they're actually they've fallen really in love with the solution of what they're building, and they haven't taken the step back to understand what the problem they're looking to solve. Now, I didn't talk about this in here just because it's a little bit complex, but the nature, a lot of complex stuff here, but the nature of building a problem statement and understanding what you're looking to solve, why it's important, and who you're solving it for is a bit of a North Star that you can go back to time and time again. And I think it does come back to that organizational clarity and health perspective. If you know your purpose, and if your purpose is really true to you, your problem should be aligned with that, and it becomes a lot easier to stay in love with those problems when adversity happens, because there will be adversity. You're going to fail, right? I mean, we all fail at some point. We make mistakes. We don't have enough time, so we do it wrong. Like there's a lot of reasons why we get in trouble that way. But if we come back to those core values, I think that's what keeps you true. I think it's also important to note it is okay to fall out of love with the problem and move to the next thing. Being resilient is important, absolutely, but sometimes it's okay to give up and move on to the next thing. We don't give ourselves a lot of credit for that, right? Like sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's too hard for right now. And so you take a pause, move on to the next thing. I mean, it's like solving a hard problem in a classroom setting. Sometimes you have to put it away for a little while and then come back to it once you're in a different mindset. And that different mindset might be 5 years later. That's totally okay. I know that in our first business, the healthcare business, if we had founded it now, completely different story. I know more about what not to do, but more importantly, the marketplace has changed. There's a bunch of environmental factors that I would be able to use and be in line with a lot more effectively. So yeah, don't be afraid to put it back on the shelf for a little while and then come back to it.
Could you give out newcomers that who wants to start a new business?
I mean, so I come to the table with a whole bunch of privilege. You know, recognize that I'm white Canadian. I think a couple of different things. One, there are a lot of problems to solve that sometimes people haven't addressed yet, or don't have the lenses to be able to look at, to be able to understand. And I think this is true when you're a newcomer to a country. It's also true when you're a newcomer to an organization. You have lenses that nobody else has. So getting to apply those lenses to problem solving, sometimes I wish that I could remove all those biases to be able to have like a clear set of lenses. So I think that's an opportunity that you can potentially harness. I also think that being able to build community just like this is not just true for newcomers, but true for everybody. Finding community to be able to be successful in is really, really critical. And because this is hard, but sometimes it's good to have like, not maybe partners, but friends around when we're working on new venture development, so that they can tell you, you're doing a good job. you will make it through this. And if you don't, we're here for you. So I think finding that network or that group of people to help you support is critical. And I don't think that's just for newcomers. I think that's for absolutely everybody. Somebody else? No?
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for joining us today. Really, 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 really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
If you got an email from me today, you know you're in. If you didn't, it's because you didn't schedule your interview, so please schedule your interview. We have 2 more days for your interviews. And if you have any questions, ask me. I know, I just.
I know, I'm sitting there, but what?